One of our most important questions we get asked all the time is, why does my thread break, or how do I stop my thread from breaking? Well, the biggest answer to that is basically your machine needs to be threaded correctly, and you need to learn to do so. With our machines, we always know that we may need to have our foot up, and we need to have a little bit of tension on your thread as you're pulling it through the thread guides. Let me show you. So we floss, we put our thread between our fingers and we go through our thread path. But I've got a little bit of tension on my thread here, so as it's going to hit all the different loops and hooks that it needs to hit inside of here, which we can't see. And well, this machine is an automatic threader, so it will thread by itself. But if you don't have them hooked into the different plate components, it won't thread, it won't give you tension, and that's one of the biggest issues. Same with a bobbin. Every bobbin has its own way of being put in, but ours forms a P, so we have the zero and we have the leg down on the left hand side. We pop it in the case and pop a finger on top of that to make sure it goes through the thread guide. And that is a successful threading. A thread breakage is another story though. If your thread breaks during your embroidery, you need to rethread. Sometimes you need to check your bobbin as well, so it means taking your hoop off. We try and undo any little burr or any little knot that we might occur, and then we'll put it back on. I start stitching straight away to make my stitch form, and then I go back 10 or so stitches. Your machine is programmed automatically to go back so many stitches. Every brand has their own idea of how many. You need to know that about your machine. Generally 10 is enough, especially when we're doing satin stitch. When we're doing satin stitch, you don't want to have a gap or a lump or a step in our stitching, so you need to be quite close to your last stitches so it becomes continuous. So the machine will be your guide. You need to learn what your machine does. One of the other things that can disturb threading is having any dust bunnies or any lumps of thread or dust or lint inside your race of your machine. That they can also stop that from turning nicely, stop it from actually the thread working on it. Also, you can get some dust inside your bobbin case. You also can get some dust inside the clip, which creates the tension on the thread as well. You need to check for these things. These things will give us erratic stitching and will sometimes cause the thread to break. For our machines, we can actually take our bobbin case out without taking the needle off, which is really nice. Another thing that can actually dislocate a thread or make it break or make it knot or bird's nest is by having a gorge or a mark or a cut inside that needle plate hole, so the thread abrades against it when it's being pulled out in a certain direction. So having making sure this is clean and smooth is really, really important. And you can do that with a very, very fine file, or your local technician can check it for burrs. So we place our bobbin in, finger on the bobbin, stop it from turning, feel the tension being formed on the thread, and then trim off. When I said earlier about that threading a machine is about a war between the needle and the bobbin, I'm really serious about that, because we need to find a nice tension for our work. So I've actually, this word fox gives us every single direction that the machine can go in while creating an embroidery. So it puts every single angle up and down, side by side, diagonally. But when we turn our work over, we're looking closely, what we're looking for is this middle row. Now, O's and zeros, etc., anything which is oval, will be always slightly erratic because we are going on to an angle, but on the whole, on the straights, we have got a third of our bobbin thread and then a third of our needle thread. So it goes needle, bobbin, needle, and that is what we're looking at as ideal. If you've got the top one happening, it means that your bobbin case is too tight. If you've got the bottom one happening, you're finding that your bobbin case is too light or too loose. So when tightening the bobbin screw, which you're allowed to do, people say, oh no, I can't do that, but you must actually learn how your machine operates. Different threads require different tensions. So on the screw, lefty loose, righty tight. So that's how we gauge with this here. Some machines have different bobbin systems and require different needs. For drop-in bobbins, we're looking for this. And so our angle on this direction will always be slightly tighter than the one up and down, but the middle is what we're looking for as being correct. Third, third, third. One of the things that can also give you erratic stitching and knots and burdens is a blunt needle. It's so simple to think to yourself, well, a needle, it's going to go through your work and it's going to go up again. It's got a big job to do. It's got to carry your thread down on and hook up with the hook on the bobbin case, get caught, and then be out of the way cleanly for the stitch to form. So if your needle has got any hesitation or it's blunt, it won't do its job. So that's really, really important that you do actually have a decent quality needle. Every 8 hours, needle change, that's what they say. I think you can hear it on a machine if your needle was blunt, a little bit of a thumping. But the one thing that people do say is that, oh, I think there was a knot in the thread. It is very rare that you would get a knot in your thread of your top thread, your embroidery thread. It's very rare. They do occur. That's the only way to join threads, because the thread is actually dyed and then it's run off onto its spools, because it will be a bigger reel, run onto smaller reels, but it will have a knot every now and again. For you to find one or two on one reel is really, really odd. Some people have never found a knot in the thread in their entire embroidery life. I've only actually found about 4 in my entire embroidery life. I've just been lucky. And then some people said, oh, I always get them. Well, I don't know how you always get them. You must be unlucky. But seriously, a thread knot really doesn't occur that very, very often. So it's quite safe to say that that's an anomaly more so than a regular occurrence. With our machines today, we put our machines through a lot more. We give more thickness underneath the foot than most normal standard embroidery does. Like, so if you're doing a name on a shirt, it's a standard embroidery setting as far as foot height goes. When you're layering up doing in the hoop projects, you'll find that your thickness increases. So you need to make sure that you watch and make sure that the embroidery foot is not scraping or dragging along the top of your work. And if it is doing that, then you need to actually increase the embroidery foot height. Most machines today can actually do that. If you can't do it digitally through your screen, you can generally do it through a little screw on your foot. You may have to purchase that foot, but if you expect to do work that has multiple layers to create dimensional projects, then that is one of the needs that you'll have to get for your machine. I'm thinking of the Memory Craft 500Es and the 550Es, where there's no digital setting to bring that foot up and down, rather than having a screw on the foot which will raise the foot and lower the foot. For our machines, they have a slight sensor on them, so they do give a good clearance, but sometimes you're coming to an area around a project where you'll have thickness and thinness and thickness and thinness. The machine needs to have a little bit of elevation underneath the foot. Elevation underneath the foot does have a negative effect, is sometimes when the machine is going backwards, if it's trying to stitch backwards, it sometimes needs a little bit of help by having a finger on your work or a pink thing, something to hold the work down so it doesn't flag under the foot. And when I'm saying flag, what I mean is when the foot is down, I don't want, you can see when I'm pushing this, that is moving up and down. I don't want that happening a great deal underneath the foot because it creates a skipped stitch and you don't want that. So just by holding something close to your foot, just keeps that work down and allows the stitch to form going in backwards. It doesn't always happen, but when you're dealing with thicker fabrics or PUs or vinyls or corks, sometimes it can skip a stitch, which you don't want. Flagging is our enemy, unfortunately, but it's something that does occur occasionally. One thing that I've said for years and years and years is when you unthread, don't be tempted to pull your thread back through your machine. You need to cut your thread and pull it through out from the needle or just above the needle. If you pull it backwards, you're going to be dragging fluff into your machine, and you don't want that to occur because that is going to give you a lack of tension. People think that pulling it back through is going to clean out the machine. Well, it's not. It's going to create lint and fluff inside your tension unit, which you do not want. So that's why we say we're going to floss and thread with a little bit of tension and make it really, really easy. So you'll notice I've threaded this, but my thread's coming off a thread stand. So this one is a thread stand which, let me just trim that. This is a thread stand which just sits on top of the machine, which is really clever. If you haven't got one, there's a separate thread stand which you could then thread and pass over and thread like that. I mean, don't put it there because it's more than likely to get caught up in your flywheel. You don't want that. Put it behind your machine or in front of your machine. Let me just pull that thread out. And we thread like so, off a thread stand. So if you don't have that, then invest in that. These are really, really very, very cheap, but they do an amazing job. They just allow you a little bit more flexibility of how the thread comes off the reel, as opposed to it being horizontal like this, which is fine for very short bursts, but I find that if you're going to be embroidering for a long time, a thread stand is definitely beneficial. I've seen a lot of different brand machines, and I've seen a lot of correspondence between people saying, I've got this problem, I've got this problem, I've got this problem. They'll say, have you got a thread stand? No, I haven't. And it can mean that the thread like this can get caught and become erratic and give you uneven stitches. When it's coming off a thread stand, it doesn't so much do that. And for my final tip, invest in good quality thread. You're only as good as the thread that you're stitching with. Well, that's all for me in this video. If you found this useful, let us know.